Hello there, welcome. Today we're talking about the newly imposed additional buyer's stamp duty, which has been recently announced by our Singapore government that is going to be imposed on properties held on inter vivos trust. In other words, living trust. So let's get going to understand more about what this framework is talking about. These new ABSD rules, first and foremost, please understand it's only applicable to inter vivos trust. Now, the word inter vivos refers to living. That means when a settler, when he transfers this property to another person called the trustee, this guy is still alive. That's what we mean by inter vivos trust. Now, with effect from 9th May 2022, the ABSD payable for such properties held in living trust, 35% is going to be straightforwardly payable. Now, later on, you will also start to learn that out of this, some parts may be refundable depending on the profile of the beneficiaries. A living trust is first and foremost created by someone called the settler during his lifetime when he is still alive, where this property is then transferred to a person, a trusted person called the trustee. But the main point about transferring this to a trustee is to allow this trustee to manage this property for the benefit of the beneficiary. Now, just to recap, what is a trust? A trust often is a form of holding properties anywhere in the world, usually reserved for the wealthier families actually, for purpose of wealth preservation, to make sure that the future generations are being taken care of, etc. Now, it always starts with this person called the settler. Let's call him Peter. Now, Peter, who is the paymaster or the one who owns the property, then transfers this property to a person called a trustee. Now, the point about transferring this property to the trustee is not for the trustee, it's not a gift to the trustee, but rather a trustee is merely there to be the legal owner who bears the legal responsibility to take care and manage of this property on behalf of someone else known as the beneficiary. Now, ultimately, the beneficiary is the one who should be receiving all kinds of benefits from this said property. Now, just to recap, trustee, Mary here in this case, is the legal owner. So in the event if this settler provides that the trustee is unable to rent or sell this property, Mary should be the one who should be signing on all these documents. Mary should be the one who should be making all these decisions on behalf of the beneficiary, Jane. But Jane, in the meantime, as a beneficiary, is an equitable owner. In other words, Jane may maintain the rights to stay in the house, use the property, benefit from the house, but just not direct rights to control and deal directly with the property. That's essentially what a trust is. Now, on 9th May 2022, IRAS, Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore, has actually announced a new framework which is newly imposed on this segment on trust. Before 9 May, the ABSD payable on trust is basically based on the profile of the beneficiary owners. But with effect from 9th May 2022, you will realize that a flat rate of 35% is going to be chargeable once this trust has been created. Now, some of this 35% that is payable may be also refundable at the end of the day within 6 months if some of these criteria are fulfilled. We're going to discuss these criteria later on. Before 9th May, effectively, additional buyer's stamp duty is payable for properties on trust depending on the profile of the beneficiary. This means something like this. Peter, Mary, and Jane, this is the three parties involved in this trust. Now, it means here, Jane as the beneficiary, whether ABSD is payable or not is going to be dependent on Jane, the beneficiary. In this case, let's give this some story. Jane is 6 years old. She's a Singaporean, and she owns this beneficiary as a beneficiary of first property. Now, ABSD is going to be 0% because Singaporean first property ABSD rates is 0. So in this case, last time before 9th May 2022, you may find that ABSD is not payable for these circumstances. Now, another example would be like this. If Jane is a 6 years old girl and she is a foreigner now, this is the first time she owns a property as a beneficiary. In this case, the ABSD payable back then was 30%. So it is straightforwardly imposed on whoever the beneficiary is, on the profile of the beneficiary. That also means if she is SPR, and if this is the second property she owns as a beneficiary, you're going to see that the ABSD rates that is payable for this trust is going to be 25%. 25 because SPR owning second property, the rates is merely 25%. Now, today, what has changed? From 9th May 2022, 35% ABSD rates is going to be payable for all properties on all kinds of living trusts that has been created on the 9th May 2022 onwards. So for such kind of living trust, in the vivos trust, straightforwardly, no matter who the beneficiary is, may be a Singaporean holding a first property today, still 35% is going to be payable. That's something you should know. So in the examination, if the papers is of the opinion, they ask you, what is the ABSD rates payable for properties held in inter vivos trust or living trust? The straightforward answer should be 35%. But that's just the first part of what we're going to talk about now. Now, the second portion is on refund criteria. This is the important part as well. Now, out of this 35%, you need to pay first. Later on, you need to submit the application for refund. So the settler, the purchaser in this case, will still need to pay up from 35% of the purchase price or valuation, whichever is lower. So you need to prepare these funds first, and later on this may be returned back to the purchaser if such criteria is fulfilled. So in this case, let's talk more about this one. So on the same equation, that means today, if Jane is 6 years old, she's a Singaporean girl, and this is the first property she owns as a beneficiary. Back then, it was supposed to be 0%, right? But right now, nope, no more. The ABSD payable today is going to be 35%. But we do understand later on, you will see refund is basically going to be applicable. Now, Peter, the settler for this case, may apply to IRAS within the next 6 months for a refund if 3 criteria are being fulfilled. The first one, if all beneficiary owners of the residential properties are identifiable individuals. So at that point, when we are setting up the trust, we can already clearly say who is the beneficiary. That's the first criteria. Second one, all these beneficiary owners must be vested interest at that point of time of transfer. That means at the day where the trust is being set up, I must already confirm that these beneficiary owners already have got ownership. We're not looking for beneficiaries owner turning 21 next time, or maybe 35 next time, or if something else happens in the future, then such transfer is going to be effective. Those kind of things is not what we mean by vested in all beneficiary owners today. More of that example will be given to you in a while's time. Now, lastly, this must be a irrevocable trust. So the beneficiary owners cannot later on be varied or revoked. That's the general idea. It has to be vested in what we call an irrevocable trust. And just to recap a little bit, I believe you guys already still remember what is an irrevocable trust. That means once I set that up, I cannot make any changes to it. I cannot cancel it anymore. Those are the kind of criteria, one of these 3 criteria that IRAS is looking for whenever a settler wants to ask for a refund. So more about that, I'll give it to you in examples later on. So that means if Jane is a Singaporean, she is first property that she owns as a beneficiary now. ABSD payable is 35%, right? This is as of 9th May 2022. But out of this, it is going to be some amount is going to be refundable within 6 months. Now, the refund amount is going to be based on the profile of the beneficiary. The difference that has been paid minus whatever is the profile of the beneficiary, that will be the refund amount payable. In other words, this case, the refund is going to be 35% fully, isn't it? Because for a Singaporean, as a beneficiary, she's holding the first property. She doesn't attract any additional buyer's stamp duty. So the refund is going to be fully 35%. On another scenario, if Jane is 6 years old and she's a SPR, Singapore permanent resident, this is the second property she's owning as a beneficiary. ABSD, same thing, payable will be 35%. But once again, it will be refundable if Peter, the settler, makes a claim for refund within the next 6 months. Now, in this case, the refund will be the difference between the amount that was paid and the amount that Jane, the beneficiary, is supposed to be imposed upon. So SPR second property, 25%, isn't it? So 35 minus 25, you get a refund of the 10%. And if this is a foreigner, first property she owns as a beneficiary, basically your ABSD payable is still a flat rate, 35%. But right now, the refund that is going to be claimable, it's merely 5%, isn't it? That's the main difference here. So between before 9th May and after 9th May, this is what is mainly the difference. Firstly, the flat rate of 35% is going to be chargeable for any kinds of properties, any properties that has been transferred to a trustee in an inter vivos trust, which means when the settler is still alive. It's flat rate 35%. The refund only comes in later on, if applicable. So that's the thing that is the major change that we need to understand today. So the above only applies if the beneficiaries are clearly identified and already vested beneficiary interest. So let's take a look more at what these wordings basically means. So refund is not going to be applicable if the settler puts this deed of trust this way. Dated 10th May, which is on the new ruling, it says this property will be held in trust of a beneficiary who will be appointed at a later date. In other words, this is possible, but in other words, at this point of time when I'm setting up the trust, I'm unable to identify who is my rightful beneficiary. In such a way, this doesn't qualify to be what we call identifiable beneficiary. In this case, a refund is not going to be applicable. Flat rate 35% paid, and that's it. No refund. The second situation is this. In this state of trust, if it is held, dated 10th May, which is on the new policy, that this property will be held in trust of Jane and will be transferred to her only if she graduates from university. Do you realize this situation? It means that the beneficiary may or may not ultimately get the property, isn't it? In the event, if she doesn't graduate, she doesn't get the property. But if she graduates, then yes, the property will be then transferred to her. In this case, when you have this situation, we say that this beneficiary, this Jane as a beneficiary, does not have vested interest at the day where the trust is being set up, right? Because it is determined based on certain uncertainty in the future. In such a circumstances, ABSD payable 35%, and there will be strictly no refund. The last scenario is this. This property that will be held if it is custodied in revocable trust, whereby the settler can cancel or revoke this trust anytime, then such trust is not going to be fulfilling some of these criteria for refund as well. So ABSD is still payable, 35% flat rate. There will be no refund as well. Now with this, that's this newly minted rule is talking about. Now, let's check whether you understand what is being talked about so far. So question is to you. Let's try to attempt this at your own comfort. Now, Peter transfers a commercial shophouse to trustee who is Mary. Now, Mary holds this trust in the trust of Jane. Now, Jane is a Singaporean who doesn't have any other properties. What is the ABSD payable then? Now, the answer is going to be 0%. Why 0? Is it because Jane is a Singaporean? Now, take note. ABSD is only payable for residential properties in Singapore. So this particular question is asking about commercial shop house. In this case, commercial and industrial properties does not attract any ABSD. Hence, this newly minted ABSD rule on trust has nothing got to do with commercial industrial properties. It's only going to be applicable if a residential property is being held in trust of. The next question. Peter transfers a condominium to trustee Mary, who will hold this property in trust of Jane. Now, Jane is a Singapore permanent resident who does not have any other properties. So what is the ABSD payable then? The answer will be straightforwardly 35%, isn't it? Now, residential property held in trust, straightforwardly 35%. But we do understand, yes, if they fulfill some of these criteria later on, a refund may be payable, isn't it? Now, following the previous question, then what is the refund that Peter can apply for? Just to give you a bit of recap, Jane is a Singapore SPR who does not have any other properties. The answer is going to be 30%. Refund 35%, which was payable, minus away 5%. 5% because Jane is a SPR. First property SPR 5% equals to 30%, right? So that's what the refund is going to be for Peter. Now the next question. Peter transfers a terrace house to trustee Jack, who will then hold this property in trust of Kelly. Now, Kelly is a foreigner. What is the ABSD rates payable? I think this should be easy. The answer is 35%, right? Okay, great. Now, in this case, what is the refund Peter can apply for? 5%. The refund, 35%, minus your 30% because Kelly is a foreigner. First property foreigner, 30%, equals to 5%. So that is the refund that Peter will be able to apply for. Now, I hope this is clear for all of us what these new rules on ABSD on trust is all about. All right, thank you guys. See you again.